Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.
They say the devil leaves no fingerprints. They say he walks through the world without leaving a trace. I always thought that was nonsense. The devil leaves traces, yes. He leaves silence. And I am an architect of silence. Look at me now. An old man in a wheelchair, in a blue prison jumpsuit, eating pudding off a plastic tray. You see a decaying body. You see a monster. But you don't see what I carry inside here. Inside here, I carry an entire cemetery, a cathedral, 93 altars. I was born with a gift. Some are born to sing hymns or persuade crowds. Others are given the intellect to build steel bridges that defy gravity. But for me, the Creator was more primitive and more perfect. Look at these hands. Don't look away from the age spots or the scars of time. Look at the structure. See the width of the palm, the thickness of the fingers, the density of the knuckles. These are not the hands of a common man. These are hydraulic presses coated in skin. Since I was a boy back in Lorain, Ohio, when the world still looked gray and cold, I knew I carried a biological weapon with me. I saw other boys playing with pocket knives, with rocks, with things outside themselves. I thought that was weak. If you need a knife to impose your will, you are a coward who depends on steel. If you need a gun, you are a noisy man who fears contact. I never feared contact. I craved it. The world is noisy, isn't it? Screams, horns, crying, lies. I discovered early on that I have the power to turn off the noise, like someone turning off a radio. Click. And then, peace. For 35 years, I was the ghost on America's highways. I was the shadow in the back seat. The police? The FBI? They were playing house while I was hunting. They looked for guns, knives, ropes. They didn't understand that the perfect weapon is flesh and bone. Sit down, Ranger. Pull up a chair. Bring that soda. You want to know the truth? Not the truth that ends up in the newspapers, but the truth that has a smell, that has a taste. Then listen. Because when I die, this story dies with me. And I don't want to go to hell without being applauded. They say God, in His infinite wisdom, gave every man a tool to till the soil of his existence. To me, He gave the geometry of the body. Prison was my university. I went in and out of reformatories like someone walking in and out of their house. It was there that I learned the physics of violence. Boxing. You think boxing is hitting someone in the face? No. Boxing is control. It is knowing exactly where the nerve runs. But punching leaves marks, blood splatters, blood smells like iron, it soaks into clothes. I didn't like the mess. I am a clean, methodical man. Strangulation. Strangulation is an art form. It is clean. It is silent. It is a final negotiation between me and the person. I remember watching people's necks, not like a lover watches, but like an engineer observes a support beam. The human neck is the most fascinating frontier of anatomy. That is where the flow of life resides. The air that enters, the blood that rises, the voice that screams. It is a fragile channel, protected only by thin muscles and cartilage. I realized very early on that if you control that channel, you don't just dominate the body, you appropriate the soul. When I started, it wasn't an accident of the journey. It was a necessary evolution. I felt a hunger that no food could satisfy, a thirst that no whiskey could quench. It was a hunger for permanence. The world treated me like a nobody, a black man, poor, wandering the margins of American society. I was invisible to the powerful. But when I wrapped these hands around someone's throat, the invisibility vanished. In that closed circle of intimacy, I was the only thing that existed in that woman's universe. I became her Alpha and Omega, the beginning of the end and the end of suffering. You call it murder. The law calls it homicide. I call it salvation. I call it absolute possession. The first time the light went out of someone's eyes under my command, I felt an electricity that shot up from the base of my spine and exploded in my skull like silent fireworks. It wasn't hate. Understand this once and for all. Stop trying to find anger where there is only twisted love. I didn't hate them. I loved them so much, I wanted to keep them in that exact moment, frozen in time, before the world ruined them further. I felt their pulse beating against my palm. Thump, 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 like a frightened bird. And then I squeezed, and the rhythm changed. It became frantic, then slow, then peace, absolute silence. That silence is the most beautiful music I have ever heard, and I played that song 93 times. I am a conductor of interrupted breath, and the world was my empty auditorium. America in the 70s and 80s was a vast, lawless playground for a man with a full tank of gas and a will to drive. You, with your cell phones, your surveillance cameras on every corner, your GPS trackers, you will never understand what true freedom was. The freedom to be a ghost. I had my Ford Thunderbird, that V8 engine roaring like a hungry beast. That car wasn't just a vehicle, it was my sanctuary, my home, my mobile trap. I would get in, and the road would unroll before me like a carpet of infinite asphalt. The I-10, Route 66, the back roads of Mississippi covered in Spanish moss, the dry deserts of Arizona where the heat made the air shiver. I didn't hunt randomly. An apex predator doesn't waste energy. I had a profile, a refined taste. I didn't go after the rich suburban girls, the ones who, if they disappeared, their lawyer daddy would call the governor and the FBI would descend in helicopters. No, I'm smarter than that. I went after the flowers growing in the trash, the forgotten ones, the broken ones, black women, poor women, addicts, prostitutes, women that society looked at and turned their faces away from in disgust. The system called them indigents, social problems. I saw them as opportunities. The approach was always soft. I didn't need to pull a knife and drag them. I used charm. An older man smiled, harmless. Hey, darling, need a ride? Looks like it's gonna rain. Hop in, let's get a drink. They got in. They always got in. Because no one else offered them kindness. I offered a moment of comfort, a soft leather seat, a song on the radio. I listened to their stories. They told me about husbands who beat them, about children social services took away, about the pain of withdrawal. I was their confessor. Before I was their executioner. I validated their humanity minutes before extinguishing it. And the police? Oh, the police, they were blind, arrogant and blind. I was pulled over dozens of times. Highway patrolmen would stop me, look at my car, see a large black man and think, must be a dealer or must have stolen something. They searched the trunk. They never found anything. My weapons were my hands, and I couldn't be arrested for carrying my own hands. They'd give me a ticket for a broken taillight and let me go. Little did they know that hours before, those same hands had turned a woman into a corpse, now resting in some swamp 50 miles back. I used their prejudice against them. They didn't care about the victims, so they didn't try to find the killer. I navigated the indifference of the system. I was the shark swimming in a sea where the lifeguards were asleep. I drew a map of death across America, and no one noticed. The moment of truth never happened on the street. It happened in isolation, on a dirt road surrounded by tall cornfields in Ohio, or in a dark alley behind an abandoned warehouse in Los Angeles. The scenery changed, but the ritual was sacred and immutable. It was the climax of our little trip together. When the car stopped and I turned off the engine, silence fell over us like a heavy blanket. They often didn't even notice the shift in atmosphere. They were relaxed, maybe high, trusting Uncle Samuel. But then I would turn. There were no shrill screams in my car. I didn't like hysteria. My left hand would seek the nape of the neck like a caress, steadying the head. The right hand, the power hand, would wrap around the throat. The thumb would find the exact depression of the trachea. Their first reaction was always confusion. Their eyes would widen, asking, "Why? I thought you were nice." And I answered, with pressure. Not a sharp blow, but a gradual, inexorable pressure, like a boa constrictor hugging its prey. But here is the secret. The part psychiatrists try to analyze and fail. I didn't kill fast. Where is the fun in that? I played with the border. I squeezed until their eyelids began to flutter, until consciousness began to slip into the dark. And then I let go. I relieved the pressure. Air rushed in with a raspy, desperate sound. Life came rushing back into their bodies. They coughed, cried, looked at me with absolute terror, the terror of someone who saw the other side and was pulled back. I allowed them to live for another minute. I allowed them to know that their life was entirely at my fingertips. I was God granting a miracle, only to revoke it moments later. I did this 2-3 times, taking them to the brink of death and bringing them back. It is an intimacy that husband and wife will never have. It is knowing the biological limit of another human being. And the last time, when I decided it was the end, I didn't let go. I maintained the pressure. I watched the light go out. It is a physical, visible change. The moist shine of the eye dries up. The pupil dilates until it covers almost all the color, fixing on nothingness. The body relaxes, all muscles give up the fight, and they become heavy, dead weight. In that moment, I felt a satisfaction so deep, so complete, it bordered on the spiritual. Afterward, I was in no rush. I stayed with them, sometimes for hours. I drove with the body in the passenger seat, their head resting against the glass, looking like they were asleep. I talked to them. I said, "You are mine now. No one will hurt you again. No one will sell you for crack again. You are safe with me." I took care of them, adjusted their clothes, combed their hair. When I left them in the woods or in an abandoned building, I placed them in a dignified position. I didn't dump bodies. I deposited relics. I knew the police would find only an empty shell, the essence, the soul, the moment of death that I had drunk. That stayed with me, stored in my head, for me to relive as many times as I wanted. Time is the only hunter that never misses a shot. It caught me not with handcuffs in a high-speed chase, but with the decay of the body, diabetes, a weak heart, legs that no longer support the weight of my own history, and of course, science, DNA, that modern black magic that can read the past in a drop of dried sweat from 30 years ago. In 2012, they found me in a shelter in Kentucky, not for murder, but for some drug nonsense. But the computer spat out the truth. It linked my name to cold cases in Los Angeles from the 80s. The walls closed in. At first, I denied it. Why give them the pleasure? They looked at me with disgust, called me a monster. But then came Ranger Holland, a smart Texan. He didn't yell. He brought me pizza, Dr. Pepper, and treated me like a human being. He realized what I really wanted. I didn't want freedom. I was too old for that. I wanted recognition. I wanted credit. I was dying. And if I took my secrets to the grave, the world would never know the magnitude of my work. They would think I killed 3 or 4. What an insult. I killed 93. I was the greatest serial killer in the history of this country, and no one knew my name. So I started talking. And to prove I wasn't lying, I asked for paper and pencils, crayons, pastels, whatever they had. My mind, you see, is not like that of a common man who forgets what he had for lunch yesterday. My memory is an art gallery preserved in amber. I close my eyes here in this cold cell, and I am back in 1978, in 1982, in 1996. I see their faces in high definition. I started drawing, not blurs, but portraits. I drew the exact arch of the eyebrows of that girl in Miami. I drew the colorful turban that the victim in New Orleans wore. I drew the crooked smile, the gap between the teeth, the scar on the cheek. The detectives would take my drawings and their hands would shake. They compared them to crime scene photos that had been molding in evidence boxes for decades and saw perfection. I remembered everything. I drew their eyes wide open, looking at me, because that is how they live in my head. These drawings are not confessions of guilt. I feel no guilt. Guilt is a construct to keep the sheep in line. The wolf feels no guilt when he eats. These drawings are my heritage. They are my trophies. While you look at them with horror, I look with affection. I gave names to those buried as Jane Does. I solved cases that the incompetent police had given up on. I am the author and the narrator of this story. Now, as death comes for me, the only visitor I cannot strangle, I smile. You will remember Ted Bundy? He was an amateur, Gacy, a clown. I was the true American boogeyman. I traveled through your cities, slept in your motels, killed under your noses, and lived to old age to tell the story my way. 93 souls. They are all here with me in this cell, waiting for us to travel together one last time. Samuel Little won, and the final silence is now mine. The light is changing now. Can you tell? It is no longer the sterile white glare of fluorescent lamps in this prison infirmary. The light is turning yellow, warm, dusty, like the sunset on a dirt road in Georgia in 1982. The air here smells of antiseptic and old age, but in my mind, I smell gasoline, sun-warmed leather upholstery, and cheap perfume. My heart is tired. It beat more times than it deserved, some would say, but it did its job. It pumped the blood that fed the hands that shaped the fate of so many. You are out there in the world of the living, worried about morality, laws, right and wrong. You look at me and say, he is going to hell. You poor fools, you understand nothing about theology. Hell is loneliness. Hell is being forgotten. And I will never be forgotten, and I will never be alone. Listen, can you hear it? It is not the silence of death. It is the sound of a V8 engine starting. My blue Thunderbird is waiting for me on the other side. And they are there, all 93 of them. They are not angry. They are not screaming for revenge. In my drawings, in my eyes, they are smiling. They know I was the only one who truly saw them. I was the only one who touched them and made them eternal. They are in the back seat, waiting for the driver. The family is gathered for the last trip. I won the game, detective. I won the game, society. I lived 80 years. I did what I wanted. I took what I wanted. I fooled your judges, your cops, your psychiatrists. I walked among you like a wolf in sheep's clothing, and you let me pass because I smiled and spoke softly. How many others like me are out there right now? How many are driving next to your daughter, your wife, at this very moment? You will never know. You only see what you want to see. My drawings, take good care of them. They are the Bible of my existence. Every stroke of colored pencil is a verse of my truth. As long as those papers exist, Samuel Little is alive. I am not just a name in an FBI file. I am the boogeyman you created with your indifference. The engine is roaring. The road is open. No police, no speed limits, no witnesses. It is time to go. Don't weep for me, and please, don't weep for them. We are happy now. We are one. Goodbye, little world. I am going where the road never ends.